This case takes place in Ahvaz, Iran on the 5th of February 2022. Ahvaz is a city in the southwest of Iran with a population of approximately 1.3 million people. Mona Haidari was born on the 24th of December 2004. When she was only 12, she was forced to marry her first cousin, a man by the name of Sajjad Haidari. The current legal age for marriage in Iran is set at only 13 for girls, although, for girls specifically, they can legally marry even younger than that with judicial and parental consent. Mona's father obtained a legal document that allowed her to be married at such a young age. I have looked to see how old Sajjad was at the time of the marriage, however, I couldn't find any information, which is something that I find rather odd. Pretty soon into this forced marriage, Mona was constantly beaten by Sajjad. Because of this, she would frequently ask for a divorce, and even asked her mother and father for help, although every time she asked for a divorce or sought any help, her parents persuaded her to go back home and continue living with Sajjad. By the age of just 14, Mona was pregnant. After giving birth to a son, the beatings continued. On multiple occasions, Mona attempted to flee, although her age and lack of access to money made this a near impossibility. She also felt an enormous amount of pressure to stay put for the sake of their son. When Mona was 17 years old, she began speaking with a man online named Ali. Mona had explained her situation to Ali, who lived in Turkey. She spoke of the beatings, the forced marriage, and how she was trapped to live this life forever. Although, with some help from Ali, Mona was able to plan a way to get herself free. In November of 2021, Mona escaped to Turkey. In the image on screen right now, you can see Mona smiling. It is believed that it was Ali who captured this image. Mona lived in Turkey for around 4 months. What she did there, I'm not entirely sure, but in the meantime, her family began the process of tracking her down. Mona's father contacted Interpol and was able to get them to assist in locating her. They were able to discover that Mona had travelled to Turkey and was still there. Her father was then able to contact the Iranian embassy in Turkey and further narrow down where she could be. Eventually, Mona's father was able to find her. He travelled to Turkey with his brother, who is Mona's uncle and Sajjad's father. When they found Mona, they tried to convince her to come back to Iran for the sake of her son. They promised her that she would be safe upon her return. The two were able to convince Mona of her safety. She said goodbye to Ali and told him that she trusted her father's judgment. She then left with her father and uncle back to Iran. Because Mona was scared to see Sajjad, her father and uncle promised that they would take her to the police, so some form of arrangement could be made between them. However, this would never happen. Sajjad caught word that Mona had returned and set out to find her with the help of his brother. One day after returning, Mona was making her way to the police station in a car. En route, her car was stopped by Sajjad and Sajjad's brother, Haidar. The two men dragged her from the car and brought her back to his house. There, the two men tied Mona's hands behind her back. Sajjad then grabbed a large knife and began to cut into Mona's throat until she was fully decapitated. Haidar rolled Mona's body up in a carpet and attempted to dispose of her body. Meanwhile, Sajjad picked up Mona's head by her hair and walked into the streets. With a knife in one hand and Mona's head in the other, he began to walk through the streets. With a grin plastered across his face, he proudly held up Mona's head and showed people as they walked by, deeply horrified by the scene they were witnessing. Onlookers began to call the police. Shortly after taking the life of Mona, Sajjad and his brother went on the run. Sajjad's mother was questioned by the police, and she admitted to them that Sajjad had on multiple occasions threatened to kill Mona, and claimed that he was responsible for her murder. Before going on the run, he had told his mother that he was the one responsible. Upon seeing Sajjad walking through the streets, many of the onlookers pulled out their mobile phones and began to record him. The two men were able to be found fairly quickly. They were arrested and charged with the killing of Mona. Videos emerged later of Sajjad parading Mona's decapitated head in the street. I can't and won't show the footage, but if you do research this case further, be careful, as it is very easy to find online. I do believe that most of the videos are blurred. However, even though it is blurred, it's incredibly horrific to see. The trial began in January of 2023. The two men were facing the death sentence. Mona's father had stated that he would never forgive them for murdering his daughter, but as time passed, he changed his mind. During the trial, Sajjad claimed that Ali had repeatedly sent pictures of himself with Mona in an attempt to humiliate him. Sajjad stated that he was enraged by this. He also claimed that many of his friends and family found out about these alleged pictures, and the fact that she had run away with another man, which he said caused him further distress. It's because of this that he argued the killing of Mona was an honor killing. An honor killing is the killing of a relative, especially a girl or woman, who is perceived to have brought dishonor on the family. Whether or not Sajjad had been sent any of these pictures, I cannot verify. It could be true, or it could be a lie to give him some kind of justification for what he did. Mona's parents had the option to demand something called qisas. This is part of Iran's Islamic law, which essentially means an eye for an eye. Because the men had killed their daughter, they could condemn them to death. However, rather than demanding retribution, the parents pardoned both of them, allowing the two men to have a significantly more lenient sentence. Sajjad was sentenced to 8 years in prison. His brother, Haidar, was sentenced to just 45 months in prison for his role in helping to kill and dispose of Mona's body. These sentences caused a great deal of uproar among many human rights organizations. Although sadly, it does seem that the Iranian government has done a good job at keeping the murder and many of the details of the murder somewhat hidden. Mona's father now says that the violence in the couple's relationship was, quote, normal. When asked why he would allow his daughter to be married below the already low legal age, he justified himself by saying that marrying her off at the age of 12 to a relative and a good man was the best for her. He even defended Sajjad by saying that he worked hard and provided Mona with the best life. He also made a point to show how he had obtained legal approval and had documentation to back himself up. He is quoted as saying, "Mona was never forced to be married, and in fact, her husband provided her with the very best of lives. It's true that there was fighting between them, and sometimes there was violence, and she would return to our home, but she only stayed for 2 or 3 days, and then he would pick her up, and life would return to normal. These fights between husband and wife are completely normal, and I don't think there was a problem, as she did not ask for a divorce." Despite saying these things, Mona's father has admitted in hindsight that she was probably too young to marry. As many of you already likely know, this is far from an isolated incident. A report published in 2019 showed that an average of 375 to 450 honor killings are recorded in Iran each year. And what's important to remember when talking about this case is that Sajjad only received 8 years for not only decapitating Mona, but proudly walking the streets with her head in his hands, smiling as he did so. And yet, some women receive decades in prison for simply removing their hijabs, or are even killed in police custody. And people protesting against the laws around making the hijab compulsory to wear have been put to death. The reason why Mona's killers received such a lenient sentence is in part due to the pardon. However, her death is classed as an honor killing, and honor killings are punishable in Iran by up to 10 years in prison.